The latest out of Japan this morning, dangerously high levels of radiation leaking from a nuclear power plant in northeastern Japan following another explosion and fire today. The plant was already damaged following last week's earthquake and tsunami. 140,000 people living near the Daiichi plant are being told to stay indoors because of the risk of radiation exposure, and officials say there is a risk of more leaks. Let's learn more about this topic. Dr. Timothy Jorgensen is the chair of the Radiation Safety Committee at Georgetown University Medical Center, and he joins us now with a little more help. Good morning. Thanks for being with us this morning. First of all, for those 140,000 people who are being told to stay indoors, will that protect them at all from that radiation that's leaking?
Yes, it will, because a lot of the radiation exposure is going to come from particles settling to the earth, and so as long as they're indoors, that will protect them from that major source of exposure.
We're all learning a little bit more about how these nuclear plants work, it seems, in the last couple of days, and part of that is learning how the leakage occurs. How does that occur? And with the situation now, as we see more and more of these explosions, how closer are we to a risk of a meltdown?
Well, the explosions form two threats. First of all, when there is an explosion, these explosions have the risk of breaking the containment and allowing the radiation to escape, but also they have the risk of propelling this radioactive material into the environment. So they have a twofold risk there. So I think there is concern that there's these ongoing explosions. There was a fire overnight, and that can also spread radioactivity, so it is a major concern.
When we see the videos of the explosions, the big blast, this is more of a water-based or a steam-based explosion, right? This is not the radiation that's spewing into the atmosphere.
That's correct. Most of these have been hydrogen explosions, and a distinction must be made. These are not hydrogen bomb explosions. Sometimes people equate this to a hydrogen bomb. This is a chemical reaction. The hydrogen is being generated from the rods, and it's accumulating. It's a very reactive gas, and it combines with oxygen and causes an explosion. Each time that happens, there's concussions that can rupture the containment.
All right, let's talk about the dangers to the public, though, and the safety levels, because we had heard even a couple of days ago when the aircraft carrier was over there, they wanted to move further away, even being 100 miles offshore, because there was some danger of exposure there. What type of danger are people in when they're that far away, 100 miles away, say, as compared to the folks who are living closer to the plant?
Well, some of those pilots brought back to the aircraft carrier some contamination on their bodies, and I understand just by showering they removed all of that contamination. The level of contamination that they got would be something equivalent to what someone would normally get in a month of living, a background exposure. So that was a very low level of exposure. So the real threat, I think, to people is that a large amount of radiation will be released at once and then settle on the population somewhere. And obviously, the further away from the source you are, the less likely that's going to happen. So the idea is to keep people as far away.
Yeah, we always think worst case scenario, and for a lot of folks, when we think about the nuclear plants, we think of Chernobyl. Is this anywhere near that scale potentially?
I think that it has not been rated as high as Chernobyl. Chernobyl was the highest level of problem that we have. This is rated somewhere in between, but still it is a major concern, mostly for the Japanese people, because if this, in a worst case scenario, and something is released, it would be deposited on them. So there's much concern for them. If the winds are wrong, and I understand there's been some detection of radioactivity even as far away as Tokyo, so it's a huge population in Japan.
Which the big question is then, as far as rescue workers and the folks who are trying to help out in this, are they putting themselves in danger just by trying to help those folks who are already in the affected areas?
Yes, the rescue workers accept a certain level of risk. They have personnel monitors so that they're continuously monitored for their levels. When their levels get too high, a fresh crew is brought in. So they rotate the crews to keep everybody's level at acceptable risk. But the workers realize that they are rescue workers, and like all rescue workers, they have to accept some level of risk.
Now, for those who are in the affected areas, physically, what does this do, or what could this do to their bodies?
Well, the biggest danger, it would take very, very high levels to give someone radiation sickness, okay? And that's not likely to happen. It's more likely that people will have a higher intake of this radioactive material, and that could cause cancer down the road. So that's the main concern, that you have an elevated level of cancer in this population because they've been exposed to high levels of radiation.
A lot of people worry that this might affect the United States if the weather conditions would bring that radiation this way. Any chance of that happening?
Well, that is very remote. Okay, but it would depend largely upon if there was some type of explosion that propelled the radioactivity high into the atmosphere and weather conditions were perfect to take it across the ocean. There is some risk that a small amount of radiation could hit the United States, but the risk of substantial amount of radiation, a health concern, I think is rather small. We would have a large lead time on that, and so people could take similar precautions of staying indoors, showering if they've been exposed, things like that. So I think the risk to the American population is quite low.
Fascinating information. Dr. Timothy Jorgensen with Georgetown University. Thanks for joining us this morning. Really appreciate it. We'll keep an eye on what's happening there. And we do remind you, if you'd like to help the victims in Japan, we have a way you can do so this morning via our phone bank. Our volunteers standing by throughout the morning to make it easy for you to donate to organizations who are helping with the recovery efforts there. All you have to do is pick up your phone and dial 202-895-3307. Again, 202-895-3307. Several folks have donated several $100s. If you just have a couple of dollars, every little bit helps this morning. So we thank everybody who's donated so far. Again, 202-895-3307. And our coverage continues online as well, myfoxdc.com, where you'll find all the latest developments as well as pictures like this of the aftermath and more information on how you can help the victims. Al?
Steve, thank you so much. It is 7:40.